Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We will give everyone just a minute to get here and get settled in. And please just be sure that your microphone is muted. Okay, we will go ahead and get started. So welcome to this webinar of the International Student One Health Alliance. Today we're going to be talking about One Health advocacy through education and policy. So first off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Bailey Archie, and I am the Educational Committee Event Manager for ISOHA, and I'm a veterinary student in the United States. And Andreas Pappas, our VP of Education, is now going to introduce himself and say a quick welcome.
Dear One Health enthusiasts, welcome to our webinar. One Health is not just an idea that can be put into practice only by scientists, but is a way of life. We, as future scientists, cannot spread the One Health message alone. We need help. We need the help of each other. Today, we will learn how we can educate our target groups of people and how we can support and be supported by policies to achieve our goals. I'm happy to invite you at the One Health Advocacy Education Policy in Action webinar. I want to express my great gratitude to our lecturers, and I hope you have a constructive time filled with much of knowledge. Enjoy your webinar. We also have some announcements from Educational Committee of ISOHA for you. We would like to remind you that the application to submit your articles for the first ISOHA journal is open now, and it will close after 6 days. And as for the mentors and the mentees of the mentorship program, congratulations for your meetings of the first match, and during the next days, you will receive an email for the second match.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andreas. So now we're going to take a couple of polls of our audience just to see who all we have here today. So our first poll is going to ask you where you are from. So I'm going to launch this and you can select your answer. Looks like we're just waiting on a couple more. Okay, so it looks like 65% of our attendees are from North or South America, followed by Europe at 16% and Africa at 14%. Great. And now we are going to ask you all, what are you studying? Or what field do you work in if you are not in school? Okay, so we've got 41% veterinary medicine, 26% public health, and 24% other. So if you're part of the other field and would like to put in the chat box what field you are a part of, we would enjoy knowing that. And then finally, what is your level of study? Okay, so we have 55% doctoral students, 26% master's, and 19% undergraduate. Okay, thanks for participating in our polls. Now we're going to move on to our speaker introductions. So I'm going to introduce both Dr. Lueddeke and Dr. Thomson. So first up, we have Dr. George Lueddeke, who is an educational advisor in higher and medical education. He's also chair of the One Health Education Task Force and chair of the International One Health for One Planet Education Initiative, which is also known as One Hope. And he's the author of a book called Survival, One Health, One Planet, One Future. Next up, we have Dr. Deborah Thomson, who is a One Health curriculum developer for primary and secondary school children. She's also a clinical veterinarian and the American Veterinary Medical Association's Congressional Science and Engineering Policy Fellow. And she is here today speaking on behalf of herself.
Yes, well, sorry about that. Well, thank you very much and welcome everyone. Thank you very much, Kaylee and Andreas, for the introduction and for the invitation, really, to be here today. It's an excellent opportunity, and it's certainly my honor, privilege, and pleasure to be invited and to speak briefly about One Health and Wellbeing, mapping out the future. It's a rather ambitious topic, to say the least, but I do hope that you will find it of interest, informative, and perhaps some parts of it even provocative. So the overall aim of the presentation is really to raise your awareness about the importance of the fundamental importance of ensuring a more just, sustainable and peaceful world through the One Health and Wellbeing concept and approach. So there are 6 subtopics or themes that I like to speak to. One of them, the first one, is putting things in perspective, existential risks, global response toward a new mindset, and One Health and Wellbeing initiatives and policy and action. And throughout the presentation, I'll highlight the fact that there's no doubt that education, lifelong learning, is the key to our future, followed by, as Billy said, queries. My own journey really towards One Health began a few years ago when I published a book. You can see it there. I'm not going to spend time reading the title, but it appeared. It was about clinical health, really. That followed another book, 2016, that appeared, based largely on global health and public health. The one that Bailey just mentioned is about, the current one is about survival, one health, one planet, one future, upon which a lot of this presentation is based. And there's a chapter coming out shortly in the summer 2020, where I look at the ecological university. To start off with, though, in writing drafting my last book, I reflected on our planet's history and our place within it. And I thought I would share that information, that research, if you will, with you. So, putting things into perspective, I think that's very important. The Earth evolution, I think most of us know that how old we are, 13.7 billion years. Many know that atoms and molecules appeared about then, at that time. Organisms, about that many years ago. Then there was a unique symbiosis between two cells, which basically, apparently this only happened once in the history of the universe. This happened only once, and was a cell combined with another bacterium, which gave it energy and actually gave rise to the complex life that we see around us. Then human beings sort of appeared about 2.5 million years ago. Modern human beings, maybe only 200,000 years ago, when you start thinking of it, not that far. And I think I would add very quickly, attitudinally, emotionally, we've only really been around for about 40,000 years. So there are quite a few revolutions that we have undergone. The cognitive revolution, 70,000 years ago. Agricultural revolution, which changed everything. 12,000 years ago, scientific revolution, which changed everything again, as we know. 500 years ago, but it was only 80 years ago, when you think of it, that the first antibiotic was created in 1935, when you think of it. Then 30 years ago, there was no doubt there was another revolution called information revolution, and they call it internet and all of that. And presently, I think we're paying a bit of a price for all of this progress, quick progress. And what we're seeing is sort of we need to address global sustainability. Might be a revolution of sorts. So we're facing many global risks, existential risks that many of you are familiar with already. Just highlight them quickly here. But this is an interesting visualization from NASA, which shows the Earth and the Moon circling around it. So the global risks were discussed in some detail about 3 weeks ago by the World Economic Forum, and interestingly enough, it was the first time ever since the inauguration of that group, the World Economic Forums, that, as you can see, the green icons, it was the first time that the environment has become the imperative, the most important priority that we face. And rightly so, because when you think of it, we're emitting about 34 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year, which, according to scientists, remains in the atmosphere for about thousands of years. And it's supposed to be absorbed by oceans and the land and so on, kicks back. But unfortunately, it seems that some of the areas that are supposed to absorbing it are becoming very saturated. Recognizing this, in 2015, 197 nations signed an agreement called the Paris Climate Agreement in December 2015. I'm sure you've heard about it. Ratified last year by 187 nations. And the pledge is the United States, I should say, the United States is actually withdrawing from this treaty, interestingly. So the major point, though, is that the countries were to pledge to keep long-term average temperature increases to about no more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels to keep us safe. The report that came out in 2018, as you can see there, gave us actually only about, at that time, 12 years to avoid catastrophe. Since it was 2 years ago, maybe it's only 10 now, who knows. What is dramatic, though, what we must remember, is that we're according to science again, we're going into the 5 hottest years yet, because the last few years were record holders in terms of temperature, climate change, and so there's a very good possibility that we'll exceed 1.5, going up to 1.6, where every degree, every portion of a degree really matters to our survival, really, especially in Northern Europe, Asia, and North America. And just to show here that every year the countries meet, many of them meet, called COP conferences. And in 2019, they agreed to right to health. And there's the last COP was in 2019, with another one coming up in Glasgow, actually, in 2020 on the 26th, later this month. There are other existential risks that we're facing. Certainly, we're seeing one of these now, the coronavirus, because of population growth and many other reasons. The outbreaks may be more than we imagined they could be. A lot of it has to do with how people are living, lifestyles, and the absence of public health systems in developing countries. Antimicrobial resistance is major, with millions of people dying because it's just not going to work anymore. And then global food security, as our population increases to 9 billion, 11 billion, the question becomes, and many of these people now moving from the rural areas into urban areas, the question becomes, how are we going to feed everyone? Major question. So there's also, well, in more developed nations, modernity, there seems to be maybe a mismatch between our genetic makeup, took us millions of years to become who we are, and our century lifestyle. I'm sure that you can relate to some of those pictures there. Another issue, certainly a big one, is what some writer recently called war, conflicts, which according to this writer is absolutely, in his view, is the greatest failure of humanity. And finally, artificial intelligence, it's all around us, embracing us, and vice versa. The battle may be, as Stephen Hawking is saying, it could be the best thing that's happening to us or the worst. So it's time to stop and think, and that's really what I think this sub-webinar is about more than anything. Because in less than 2 human generations, we know that population size of vertebrate species have dropped by 50%. These are the actual animals, beings, if you will, that allow us to breathe. And more recently, I was reading that the fish are actually shrinking because of warming seas, and many of the fish that we count on, sardines, cod, haddock, and so on, have actually shrunken to half their size. And to make matters worse, it's, of course, toxic air is killing many people as well. So there's a high price of our global neglect of planet Earth. We know that, for example, that pandemics, to show you what the coronavirus will cost us about 570 billion United States dollars, possible, which is about 0.7% of global income. So when you look at that more closely, what we're missing globally are public health systems that not only work together more than they do now, human medicine, veterinary medicine, but studies have indicated that all that's needed in United States dollars is 3.4 billion per year to give international standards, to achieve international standards across the world. So when you think of, in terms of money that the global budget the global budget in terms of United States dollars, 117 trillion. It's a million, I don't know, a lot of zeros. And out of that, only a small pocket, 0.07%, is needed to achieve international standards. This question, the reality of that. So the main global response to all of this, as many of you will know, have been the Sustainable Development Goals, which were aimed to address poverty, and it was adopted in 2015. All these goals signed up by 195 nations. There's 17 goals, quite a few targets, quite a few indicators, standards. But the take-up of these goals, even though they're crucial to our sustainability, has been very, very slow by governments, by corporations, and by people. And in fact, is reversing. So there's a missing link here. And although I don't have the answers, I think part of the problem is just communicating to people like you and me in terms of unifying our thinking and that's what in terms of what is at stake, making it real for all of us. And I don't think that message has come across yet. It's not a criticism of the SDGs, which I think are excellent, but it's something we need to reflect on. So in my own view, what's One Health and Wellbeing? Well, it's basically people working together to ensure sustainable and well-being of the planet, and I must say, all species, not just Homo sapiens, but all species. The balance has to be retained. The balance that took millions of years to create has to be retained. Not now, not only now, but in the future. The World Bank and many, many other organizations, I have a slide on that shortly, have bought into this concept, and rightly so. So what is One Health and Wellbeing again? Well, it's more than the relationship between animals and people and disease. It's a concept that underpins everything. It's holistic, it applies to the planet and all species. Transdisciplinary, you can see all the disciplines here that are very closely related to making it a success in terms of humanity and the planet. And it relates to all policies and strategies, whether they're socioeconomic, geopolitical, or environmental. So it's a fundamental mandate, really, imperative for all of us. So in terms of linking One Health and Wellbeing to the Sustainable Development Goals, my argument has been, I'm not sure many people have heard it, but certainly the big part of the book there is that One Health and Wellbeing, because it is so crucial to everything else, needs to underpin, needs to inform the SDGs. And that means basically a new mindset for all of us. There are, 7.7 billion people on the planet, 7.7 billion, and we need to change from seeing the world as a place made especially for humans and a place without limits. We're digging more stuff out of the planet than we're putting back in, that's for sure. And there's a feeling that our task, basically for human beings, is to subdue the earth and exploit the earth. We need to adopt a new paradigm, a new worldview that ensures that our needs are compatible with those of the planet, the ecosystem. We have some major hurdles. For one thing, the biggest hurdle, I think, you may or may not agree, is we need to accept that business and finance are the servants of our civilization, not its masters, according to Edward Lucas. I think that cartoon says it very quickly, very, very well. The problem, of course, is huge, humongous, because we rely so much on our economy. But what this diagram says, basically, as Lucas just said, the economy needs to serve society. And what that basically now means is quite different from what I would have thought 10, 20 years ago. It's the biosphere, it's our environment that dictates, to a large extent, what activities human beings can engage in, which actually are bounded, which indeed should inform the economy that we need, that we can actually afford in every way, shape, or form. It's a different way of looking at things. And the one way of doing that, people have been arguing this, is the circular economy, designing waste out of the system. And there are other ways, strategies that people are looking at. France, for example, is looking strongly at tree planting. In Paris, low carbon cities, urban wood, urban farms, and doing something about fossil fuels, replacing fossil fuels, maybe putting taxes on things. But what we do need, it's no doubt, is a non-proliferation treaty where all countries can say, yes, we agree, we can't do this any longer or much longer without damaging the environment. Of course, at the World Economic Forum, we had Greta Thunberg speaking there, and she did say a lot of things that made a lot of sense, to me at least. And she said to all these highly global leaders, she said, I don't want you to listen to me, I want you to listen to the scientists. And she's absolutely right there. The science is there. And for example, NASA's tracking of emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, is very clear as to what's happening there. So one of the big problems, of course, that we're seeing across the world, very, very worrying, very, very concerning, this is increase in tribalism that's occurring. Nationalism, populism, tribalism. It's a culture that we're creating of them and us, and we've, wars and so on. We're failing to see the humanity of each other, and we blame everything but ourselves. And rather than helping each other, the richer countries helping the poorer countries, well, the richer countries are saying, well, we'll give you money as long as we get something back. That unfortunately is the case. In terms of take-up of the One Health and Wellbeing, well, as when you get a recording of this particular webinar, and you have a chance to look at these names, the numbers of individual institutions and organizations that have bought into One Health, and rightly so, has increased and is increasing enormously. Certainly the One Health Commission, Dr. Cheryl Stroud there, One Health happenings that many of you are familiar with, and Dr. Bruce Kaplan at the One Health Initiative have many, many more names if you were looking for organizations to share. So out of the book, in the book, as I was writing it, I came across, I thought one night I said, what is this all about? What messages should I be leaving here in the book? And I came up with 10 propositions for global sustainability. I'm not going to waste your time right now talking about each one in turn, but I must highlight that 9 and 10 relate directly to the work of the United Nations. But the one that I would to focus on briefly is number 7, which is really saying that the unifying One Health and Wellbeing concept, what if it became the cornerstone of our educational systems and our societal institutions? And it is through that we might be able to do better in creating this more just, sustainable, peaceful world that we're seeking. The world definitely becomes what we learn. So with that in mind, the One Health Commission, the One Health Initiative, developed, if you will, created the One Hope that Deborah talked about before. And that One Hope in a nutshell is really, the vision is where people of all ages embrace our One Health concept and approach and recognize the interdependencies of humans, animals, plants, and their environment. And the aim of the project is to build global capacity for promoting and valuing these concepts and underpinning the Sustainable Development Goals. The contributors are from the various global regions, and we're trying to do this, as was said before, through working groups, different regions and different interest areas. The planning team members, we're up to about 23 now. University of California, Davis just joined a few days ago. Excellent. So if you care to join, send an email to either myself or to Dr. Stroud. So in terms of public policy goals, I'll just share this very quickly with you. There's a report that came out, Cambridge University, through the Bennett Institute for Public Policy, which I think was inaugurated in 2018. And I certainly agree with a lot of their policy statements. Multidisciplinary thinking and research, absolutely. Changing behaviors across population, yes. Providing evidence on effective ways of changing, absolutely, yes. But the last sentence in the introduction caught my eye, because it says, the last sentence says, how should we frame the problems we face and measure our goals and outcomes? How can we keep people at the heart of public policy? Well, that's where I find an issue, because it's really the need for policy issues and policy strategies to shift from human centrism, what we do to ourselves and to the planet, to ecocentrism. That's really my main concern with that report. There's some excellent examples if you're looking for strategies, policies that I can point you to. One of them is this one here from PAHO and WHO. It's called RIMSA 17, came out in 2016, and it's an excellent statement of where One Health and SDG intersect. Very, very useful to read that whole document because the wording is superb, absolutely excellent. So the challenge then is to change our perspective from two-dimensional thinking, what's the next report, quarterly report, when's the election, to long-term effects, to long-term thinking. And three-dimensional thinking, whereby our decisions, globally, nationally, locally, need to be seen through a lens that says, how will this decision impact on, humans, animals, plants, and the environment. So the top priorities then, for me at least, are focusing on local communities, finding common ground, evolving policies that do meet some of these criteria, in fact, all of these criteria: prevention, compassion, accountability to people and to the planet, and not only them. Higher education, many of you are attending classes now. The future is uncertain, but one thing that came out at the Davos, at the World Economic Forum conference a few weeks ago, is the importance of looking at human skills, not just digital competencies, and to tailor curriculum that focus on flexible growth mindset and approaches problems from many perspectives in the same vein as One Health does. So in terms of concluding slide, One Health and Wellbeing should underpin social institutions, education, as I've said, and also I'm arguing for, not only I, but many other people now are arguing for the concept of the ecological university. Not time right now to really get into that, but it comes really from Professor, a lot of the thinking comes from Professor Ron Barnett at UCL in London, and he feels, and rightly so, I think, that the main challenge that we face is matching values appropriate for the 21st century and ensuring relevance in society to the world. That's the real challenge for all universities. So he's come up with a, okay, before I say that, I think what I'm trying to say in this diagram is that One Health and Wellbeing should underpin the Sustainable Development Goals, which in turn should underpin all education, including the ecological universities, which should in turn underpin the transformative vision behind the ecological university, behind the SDGs. So, big question. One question is, are the challenges related to science, social complexities, and ecological threats that we all face, are they far exceeding our current political will and expertise? And if so, then it's time to revitalize and reform our global leadership and find collaborative ways with us, civil society, with every organization, to find solutions that fit the One Health and Wellbeing concept. I'm a strong believer in Generation Z, anyone born between, the 1990s, let's say. I think you are the future to a large extent. You're going to be the leaders. And I think One Health and Wellbeing is right up you're the fixers, is right up your alley. My book is dedicated to all those who believe in the oneness of the world, and I cannot understand why, as they came out of the World Economic Forum, why the fractures within our global community appear right now only to be widening and not closing. Do they not know, do these leaders that we have not know what is at stake? And can we really tackle the existential threats that face us while many countries are playing by different rules, with some ignoring the rules altogether? I like what Carl Sagan said in the 1990s. You may have read this before. There is no help coming from anywhere except from ourselves. Thank you. There's at the end of the program, there's the references for it. And then later we'll have the quiz. Well, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lueddeke. If anyone has questions for him, we can save those for the end. So next, we are going to switch to Dr. Deborah Thomson, and Andreas is going to give her the screen.
Okay, welcome, welcome. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. Let me just blow this up to full screen. Here we are. Okay, hi everybody, it's Dr. Thomson, and we are going to be talking about a simple math equation, One Health plus children equals a hopeful future. Before that, I wanted to have a special thank you to ISOHA for inviting me. It's an absolute honor to be speaking with all of you, as well as speaking alongside the world-renowned Dr. Lueddeke, because if you know anything about One Health, you know his name. I actually have one of his books on my bookshelf right now that I'm looking at. So it's an absolute honor to be in the same conversation as Dr. Lueddeke, and thanks again for inviting me. Now, before I became a veterinarian, I was actually teaching quite a bit. And I was working full-time in a middle school, teaching students between the ages of 11 to 16. And during my undergraduate degrees, I was teaching primary school students, mainly music students, in small groups or private lessons. And then as a young adult, I was teaching adults either with music or English as a second or third or fourth language, so English language learners. And this illustration on the right is a painting of one of my absolute favorite painters, Norman Rockwell. And I use this example to show how I got my students to practice verb tenses. So you can see in the morning, the family is going on a great trip. Everybody's very excited and full of energy. So in the morning, we were excited. And then at night, we will be exhausted. So you could see at the bottom, everybody's pretty tired from their vacation or holiday. And that is a really good example of how I used activities to formulate lessons and get the kids actually moving and excited about it. They were so excited about seeing different pictures and formulating stories out of it. They forgot about practicing their verb tenses. It just came naturally to them, and they wanted to form plays out of these pictures. So it's just a good reminder of how getting students to move and be active can get them to honestly be excited about the material they are learning. And from teaching, I became a veterinarian. I've worked with several species. You could see that second to the left picture, I'm working with an Asian elephant. That's my largest patient so far. My smallest patient was a dwarf hamster, so 80 grams. So as a veterinarian, everything except for human primates is what our gig is. So it's pretty exciting life, which is wonderful. Let's not talk about me anymore. I am more than happy to talk about One Health, which is my absolute passion. So what is One Health? This is me teaching 5- and 6-year-olds about One Health. The way I explain One Health to the general public is teamwork between people who care about the environment, animal health, and human health. Notice how I use very simple language. Everybody over the age of 4 years old knows what teamwork is. Now, keep in mind, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, even some 6-year-olds do not practice teamwork. It's all about me, me, me at that age, but they understand the word. Kids or children over the age of 7 and 8 often know what the environment means, but sometimes in the classroom, I have to tell students, okay, well, if we're in the classroom, then the classroom is our environment. It is our surroundings. So you have to explain depending on what age group you're really talking to, and go from there. Now, oftentimes, a lot of children like animals. So animal health is pretty important. Human health, kids don't really care about their own health. But if you talk about, say, their mother's health or their grandmother's health, that's when they start to become interested. So again, point of this slide, simple language, and make sure that you hit the solid points: environmental health, animal health, and human health. Now, when I go into schools in the United States, not every student in the classroom has English as a first language. So I use as many drawings as possible. And here you can see the extent of my artistic abilities. I can draw stick figures, and that's about it. But ultimately, the children understand what the concept of One Health is: the interaction and the teamwork between people who care about people, the environment, and animals. So this child took the Venn diagram into a different layout. Ultimately, he or she understands the concept. This student wanted to be a little bit more artistic, and then this person wanted to be more simple. Either way, they truly understand the concept, interaction, and teamwork of people who care about the environment, animal health, and human health. Now, think to yourself, what vocabulary word do you think this child is trying to illustrate with this drawing? Hint, it is not epidemic, and it is not One Health or teamwork. It is zoonotic disease. And when I talk to an 8-year-old about a zoonotic disease, you could say, oh, well, that sounds like a really long term. No child will remember that. Well, there are tips to get them to remember. Number one, I explain, it's a disease. If they don't know what a disease is, I say it's a germ that can jump between different species. And when I say jump, I physically jump. Keep in mind, some of these students do not have English as their first language. So the more visual aids you provide to these students, the better it is for their learning. So again, it's a germ that can jump between different species. Now, then I ask the students, who here has gone to the zoo? And a lot of students raise their hand. I say, in a zoo, is there just one species or are there many species? And a lot of children say, many species. Wonderful. Let's name some. Some people say a lion as an example, and then another person says an elephant. And then eventually we get to, oh, how about maybe the people walking around? Are people or humans animals? Yeah, they're animals. And then from that, we have a conversation of, yes, animals is a type of, humans, type of species of animals. So if a zoonotic disease is a germ or a disease that can jump between different species, then yeah, it's a germ that can be shared between, say, an elephant and a person, and then from a person to an elephant. So I go through that discussion with the kids and they seem to remember it. Keep in mind, sometimes you have to explain the word species, especially if you're working with children under the age of 9. So this is from a whiteboard of one of my lessons. We talk about One Health species, zoonotic disease, epidemic, and vaccine. Now you understand what One Health is, right? It's teamwork between people who care about the environment, animal health, and human health. So now that you know that, you can go out and teach One Health. You see, at the end of my very first lesson with 8- and 9-year-old students, I had a few volunteers with me. One, Jen, on the far left, she's a stormwater specialist. So you could say, okay, I understand she's in environmental health, that makes sense. But Betty in the middle and Tyler on the right, Betty sells insurance to companies. And Tyler is a sound engineer. You would argue, okay, not much to do with One Health, but you know what? These people have a passion for One Health, and they see the importance of teaching the next generation about it. How did we get into schools? Now, this is what I want everybody to write down. Everybody who's in a university, be it undergraduate, master's, or doctorate level, it doesn't matter. Everybody write this down. Remember it, please. So the way I was able to get the message of One Health and lessons of One Health into schools is by talking to people at University of California at Berkeley, because they have a program that brings science and engineering students of any level, undergraduate, master's, or doctorate students, into underserved schools, primary schools mainly, and serve as voluntary role models for science and engineering. They focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I did not go to University of California at Berkeley, but I heard of this program, and I lived down the road from there. So I found out who was the head of this program. I met for coffee one day, and I brought 7 different lessons that were focused on One Health and various age groups. And from there, they said, well, oftentimes we don't have people outside from the community coming to talk, but given how much you have already brought to the table, we're interested in working together. And that's exactly what happened. So after I say if I work 4 weekdays and 1 weekend day, then on my spare weekday, say a Friday, for instance, then I go into classrooms and I teach about One Health. You can do this at your school. But you may say, okay, that sounds like a really big ask. I'm interested, but how do I even start? Where do I start? Well, this is the kicker. If you are at a university, you are at the best position you can possibly be. Once you graduate, you will not have access to these resources. So now is the time to act. First, you need to figure out who are the educational students in your university. And when I say educational students, I mean students who want to become teachers. Is there a student club of theirs that you can partner up with? Is there an academic advisor of theirs that you can introduce yourself to? Ultimately, build a relationship with that club's head or with that academic advisor. Anybody who you see wants to go into primary and secondary school education, those should be your best friends starting right now. Once you show them that you are trustworthy and they understand the concept of One Health, then you can formulate partnerships. The other thing that you can do is sign up for One Hope, and that's what Dr. Lueddeke was talking about earlier. One Hope is One Health for One Planet education, and it is trying all around the world, based on your region, to have people of similar interest areas. So say if you want to teach 5 to 18-year-old students, just like what I have been doing, but in your community, you can partner up with people of similar interests, and the group should consist of at least one educator to help lead the way in that. But you can bring your own passion to the group and create One Health lesson plans on your own. And then the teacher should be able to help guide you in how to get those lessons into your community. Now we're talking to a general audience today. People are from all around the world. I remember the stats were 14% from Africa, 16% from Europe, the rest from North and South America. We all know, especially because Dr. Lueddeke talked about it, the Sustainable Development Goals. And they're coming from the United Nations, right? So I did not want to necessarily say UN Sustainable Development Goals, because then it just looked like unsustainable. But we all know that this is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Dr. Lueddeke already went through a lot of them, but just to highlight where One Health fits in very, very well. Zero hunger, food security, right? Quality education. Well, if you make good One Health lessons, you in and of itself, that whole concept is you're providing quality education. Peace, justice, and strong institutions, you're all at universities. If you can get One Health lessons into your community coming from the institution, from the university, all the power to you. And partnerships for the goals. Partnership is another word for teamwork, is another word for One Health. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples of how you can get One Health into classrooms. First off, when it comes to lessons, keep it nice and simple. I already talked about my wonderful artistic abilities. It doesn't matter if you can draw or not, just use simple diagrams. You need to know your audience. Now, for 5 and 7-year-olds, like I said before, they're all about me, me, me. They're not going to be into competitions or problem solving. They want to be wowed. So if you can create a lesson that surrounds the teamwork of people who care about the environment, animal health, and human health, and make there be something that gets the kids to go wow about it, then they can go home, tell their parents about how exciting this One Health lesson was, and in so doing, these children not only learn about One Health, but they're also at the same time educating their parent or their other caregiver if it's a grandparent. So you are teaching not just one generation, but multiple generations, and that's how you can change society. You can also definitely try your best to understand the teachers, and this is where your university network comes in. Are there any teacher training programs that go to your university? Anything on the weekends that provides extra, say, continuing education for teachers in your community? If that's the case, be in that room. Get your network, flush out your network so that you can gain more and more connections. Also, are there any community outreach programs, just like the Bay Area Scientists in Schools program with University of California at Davis? Anything that's focused on STEM, anything to get out into the community. Figure out who the best people are to talk to and make sure that they understand what One Health is and why it's important to teach One Health. Now, I've taught, say in the academic year of 2018 to 19, I taught over 30 classrooms about One Health. But with this particular survey, about 15 students responded to my survey question. The question was, how effective was this One Health lesson in getting your students further interested in science as a whole? And 100% of the teachers said at least a little. 80% said a moderate amount to a lot, and then 2 out of 15 people said a great deal. That's something special, and you can do this in your own community. Now, say if you say, okay, I'm going to be graduating eventually. How can I make this have lasting impacts? Well, this is how you have to get other students involved in your university. These 3 young women in front of you talking to, what would that be? Probably about 25, 30, 8 and 9-year-old students. They are all undergraduate students at University of California at Berkeley. So I created these lesson plans. I trained Doris, who's the far left young woman on the left, how to teach these lessons, and then she's gone and told the other pre-veterinary students at the university about this lesson, and they're continuing teaching these lessons even though now I live in Washington, D.C., which is 3,000 miles away from Berkeley, California. So as long as you can get classmates who are in lower grades than you, then you can get this sustainability. Other options, you say, okay, well, creating One Health lessons, it might be too much work for me right now. Other ways to get One Health into your community, you can talk about One Health at Earth Day, One Health Day, World Rabies Day. And this is just an example from an Earth Day presentation about One Health. You may also know that the Smithsonian has a fantastic exhibit. Smithsonian is out of Washington, D.C. One World, One Health. They have a do-it-yourself outbreak exhibit. And in order to bring this material into your neighborhood, your community, you need to contact this email address. You send an email to them and they'll give you more information. nmnh-exhibit, DIY, so do it yourself, at si.edu. Why is One Health important? One of my 8-year-old students said, so you can keep the environment, animals, and people healthy all at the same time. Keep in mind, for the general public, the environment includes plants. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you, Dr. Thomson. So now we are going to move into our question section. Okay, so first up we have a question from ISOHA for Dr. Lueddeke. So what can students do to induce or promote policy changes that favor a One Health or interdisciplinary approach to community health?
Thank you very much, Bailey. That's a crucial question, and I did think about it as it was coming up here. That's for sure. Well, it's an interesting question, really, and it's very timely because in a recent UK Ipsos survey of I'm not sure how many thousands of people were involved, they found out that only 35% of the population that they surveyed said that they are very concerned about the environment. Only a third, and only 7% of these actually campaigned or had written to their MP. Most people look to government and business to lead the way, not themselves. So against this background, here are a few suggestions, very quick suggestions of trying to answer the question of how to promote policy changes. Well, one way is actually what's happening right now, which is really, I would really urge everyone to continue to participate at conferences, webinars like the one that we're in right now. I've learned a lot from Dr. Thomson's, that's for sure, and also the references, for example, at the end of my session might be of interest. I encourage you to read these and share some of the information with family, friends, and on Facebook. Just get dialogue, discussion going. Certainly, it can't be right, knowing what we know, that only a third of us, population in the UK, I'm not sure about the United States and other parts of the world, are interested in the environment. I mean, it's quite difficult to understand. Another suggestion would be, whenever possible, for individuals, or maybe you're doing this already, to join public education campaigns, to join environment campaigns. As long as they're peaceful, raise awareness and write to MPs. It's important to push the government to meet targets of the Paris Climate Agreement and all the 17 SDGs just spoken about. I think every country needs to have, including the UK and the United States and Canada, and so on, every country and developed nations, they need to have a national sustainability and well-being plan in place much sooner than later. Another, from an education point of view, I came across the Association of Faculties of Medical Education of Canada, AFMC, which requires now all medical schools in Canada to have a social accountability mandate to direct education, research, and service, and to address the pivotal health concerns of communities and so on. I think this particular social accountability mandate should be taken on board by veterinary medicine, human medicine, and other programs globally. And there is, just as Dr. Thomson was just saying, there's a need for a One Health and Wellbeing and SDG curriculum, need for a One Health and Wellbeing and SDG curriculum components across all courses, primary to secondary education, including the ecological university and the community. I would suggest already, I've suggested this before, but why not use the 10 propositions for global sustainability as a platform to engage in discussions with your colleagues, with each other. And very, very important, my last one really, always ask why. We need to get at the root causes of Ebola, of the coronavirus. I think we know already, but we have to find solutions quickly. And that means, as Dr. Thomson said, teamwork, collaboration, cooperation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Lueddeke. And just a reminder, if anyone in the audience has questions, we will answer those in a few minutes. Next up, we are going to ask Dr. Thomson a question. What are ways that we can educate adults in our lives on One Health outside of a traditional classroom setting?
That's an excellent question. You could do it the indirect way in teaching students, so their children, about One Health. And as long as it's a good lesson and you get that wow factor and you get the kids excited about One Health, and they can come home and talk to their parents about One Health and educate that way. You can also refer to things that are, say, in the news that adults would know about. For instance, the 2019 novel coronavirus is all over the news, at least in the United States, and I imagine your community as well. And the thought is that this particular virus originated in animals. Now, we don't know if, honestly, we will ever figure out if that is the case or not, but that's the thinking, and that's making headlines. And that is a wonderful way for you to start that conversation. Oh yeah, that actually is called a zoonotic disease. Or if you don't even want to talk about the jargon of public health and One Health people, then you can just say, oh yeah, well, at least a solid 60% of emerging diseases can come from animals, so that's not really surprising. Oh yeah, it's because when there's deterioration of the environment, then you have more wildlife interacting with people. So that isn't just in China, that's in a lot of places around the world. And that's actually referring to something called One Health, and then having the adults hear the term One Health several times. So not just talk to the students, the children, but also talk to the adults in a way that they already are primed to listen. So as in making reference to news articles and things like that, or telling stories about how a tick-borne disease can spread around the world because the ticks are moving to new places. So that's just one example. Thanks for the question.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Thomson. Now we will move on to questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. There's a little hand icon that you can click, and then we will call on you and you can unmute your microphone and ask your question. Okay, Hayat Abbasi, would you like to ask your question?
Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, my question, my first question is, how can we deal with there's a mention for, like business, economy, for politics. I mentioned in my written question that, for example, with all the agreement about the carbon emission, when the current president was elected, he just with just an executive order, or decided not to follow or to just drop from this deal. So how can we deal with this? and also with the adults, who can have their weight, in order to be informed correctly. There's, even TV channels who will be working against the real message, and the real information that is scientific, proved information, and they will be passing an opposite message. How can you deal with these when it become really, like politics came into the game? And how can you educate adults who are more motivated, more following a political leader, and then they are not willing to listen, or they are only listening to what they are watching in TV, for their specific channels that they are following? How can we deal with that?
Dr. Lueddeke, do you want to take that one?
Oh, it's a very, very good question, because that's really what we're up against. We shouldn't be saying up against. This is really where we need to do some more thinking. I'd like to answer it at two levels quickly. I think at the United Nations level, that's really to a large extent where some of these debates should be going on. You consider, for example, the United Nations Security Council. It was formed in 1946. There are 5 permanent members, the same ones who were there in 1946. Same countries are represented. But since that time, everything has moved on in the world, really. Populations have shifted, have grown. Economies have shifting towards the south, towards Asia and so on. And yet, when you look at the way that solutions or the decisions are made at the global level, we find that the same 5 nations, China, Russia, France, Germany, United Kingdom, are still making these decisions, inviting nations that are not permanent when it's possible. 15 nations, I think. So, because as a result, Africa with 1.3 billion people, India with about as many, 1.2 billion, Southeast Asia, and so on, are not directly represented at the United Nations Security Council. So I think that's one of the main changes that needs to occur at that level. It really does. They need to become more inclusive, and most importantly, I should say equally importantly, these nations who signed up to the SDGs, 195 nations, signed the agreement for peace and so on and so forth, have to learn to translate what they signed for into reality in the countries, locally, nationally, locally. Secondly, very quickly, I think the economic model that we currently have is not sustainable. We cannot have an economy that's based on removing moving things that are in the earth, basically, or grown from the earth, without having to pay a huge price. So to me, the individuals who make these decisions at national levels, and companies and corporations, have to start to reflect the fact that the decisions that they make have to be long-term, not short-term. And I'm happy to say that I'm reading more and more increasingly that there are some companies, I don't want to mention right now, but are paying less attention, CEOs are paying less attention to shareholders, or politicians ought to be paying less attention to their becoming elected again in 4 or 5 years' time, to trying to look at things in the long run. Put on the hat of a parent, of an adult, and think about the generations to come. It's got to be both mind and heart working together. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lueddeke. And also, just a side note, Dr. Cheryl Stroud, the director of the One Health Commission, sent a message that says the recycling movement in the US was driven by young students who learned it from their teachers. Those young students had a huge impact on their parents, urging them to start recycling. So that's something I didn't know. I think that's a great point. So thanks, Dr. Stroud. Okay, our next question is going to be from Kitam Al-Utaibi. If you would like to ask your question, you can go ahead and unmute your microphone. It looks like you're unmuted, so you can go ahead and ask your question. Kitam, are you there? Okay, we're going to move on to Nathan Uchtman.
Hi, thanks for the chance to ask the question. So the context for my question is a belief that we need to have ownership at a local level for some of these collaborative or One Health holistic frameworks, and a belief that with humility, we're likely to make it farther. And so all across the world, there are indigenous people who for generations and millennia have developed these types of holistic relationships where they don't see themselves as separate from the natural world. And I see a lot of potential for overlap and collaboration with One Health advocates. And so I'm just curious to know if there are any dedicated efforts that would highlight these overlaps between One Health and indigenous people or traditional ecological knowledge, or if there's any way that we could formalize partnerships between One Health advocates and indigenous people. Thank you.
Nathan, it's Dr. Thomson. I love that concept. I absolutely love it. And I totally agree with you on the humility part and how with Native populations, they truly understand the concept of One Health. You know, they don't necessarily label it as One Health, but it's what they practice, right? To my knowledge, there is no type of organization that's focused on that. So Nathan, go ahead, get that niche and own it.
Shall I just add something to that briefly? I fully agree, Nathan, with your suggestion, recommendation, and so on. In fact, I worked a lot in Canada, my early career at least, with the Indigenous population, the Cree population in Northern Ontario. And I think One Health sort of became part of me, at least a seed was sown, for the very reason that you suggested. You know, this holistic approach to life and the cycle of life. And it's interesting, if nothing else, for me right now, to reflect on this, what you've just said, because to a large extent, the indigenous populations know what life is really all about. You know, not only human life, but the natural, the other forms of other species and their relation to them. We have a lot to learn from them. And I agree with Dr. Thomson. You know, we need to find ways of embracing them much differently. Maybe again, One Hope would be a vehicle to help to try to do this.
Great. And also Dr. Cheryl Stroud has a comment on this.
That was a great question, and I really appreciate the concept that Indigenous peoples often know this very naturally for many eons, and they don't necessarily call it One Health, but that's what it is. I just want to mention that there is a One Health in the Arctic movement or organized effort going on, being led in the U.S. and with the University of Alaska at Fairbanks. You can find some information on that program in a webinar that the Commission and ISOHA led last October. After I quit talking, I'll go find the link and put it in the well, I guess I can't get this in the chat box except to the organizers, so I'll put it in and you guys can push it out to the group. But it is a fascinating way of tapping into that ancient knowledge, really. One Health to me is all about resurrecting an ancient knowledge of this holistic approach. So I would love to see that happening in other parts of the world where that indigenous knowledge was brought forward into the conversation for One Health. So thank you very much for pointing that out.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Stroud. And next we have a question from Thomas Rose.
Hi there, Tom Rose here from University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. Just two comments really. One is to encourage a lot of students that may be on this seminar to consider continuing your education in pursuing Masters of Public Health. And the other comment is somebody's asking how to educate adults. And there are various opportunities through organizations such as Rotary, which I know is an international organization, and constantly looking for speakers for their meetings. So the one opportunity there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. And next we
Can I
have
add one thing to that? Rotary Club absolutely is a fabulous idea, as well as Toastmasters International. So another way to get the message out there, to join a Toastmasters International group.
I just say, I think that's absolutely right what Tom just said there. I think what needs to maybe be reconsidered is just how we go about education, though. And again, I don't want to go into a lengthy spiel here, but we miss a lot of opportunities, it seems to me, in universities and continuing education and so on, because the model of teaching that's used very often is didactic, very often is, here's information, just what we're doing right now in a way. Here's information on wish to share it and so on, rather than, what has become commonly known as inquiry-based learning or problem-solving learning or whatever. When we have groups of adults who, let's say, online or offline, who come together, why not use their expertise, their experience more in terms of engaging them in the conversation of solving problems? I think now we don't have too many textbooks written that have the answers that we're seeking. So maybe we need to rely much more on people's, experience and perceptions than ever before.
Perfect. Thank you. And next we have a question from Aubriana Johnson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Aubriana, and I had a question, but I just want to make a comment to what was just said also. I'm actually pursuing my master's in health sciences with a concentration in One Health at the University of Florida. So I completely agree with the whole continuing education situation. And the comment before that, I found that it is strategic to enter, something that you are passionate about, whether it be community service or whatever, in a specific niche, and then use that, as a way to spread the One Health mission. For example, I run a 4-H club, and it's primarily about horses, but I teach the kids about the environment and, how the horses need to be taken care of, but also the risks when you're out, riding through the woods or walking through the pastures, checking yourself for ticks, things like that, and why. So I feel like, it starts off as a one way street to get in there. And then, you can open it up more and teach the One Health concepts. in a way that the kids care about it. And it doesn't even have to be kids, but adults, anybody. If you enter kind of their area and then use that specific subject to apply to One Health. But now my question, I have been doing a lot more research lately on One Health, like in the media, especially social media, just because I am a millennial and that's where I live. And I just wanted to, you know, just get your feedback on how best to utilize social media to promote the message of One Health, especially since we're, you know, we are the future. So you have to go where the people are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100% agree with what you said, and great job with the 4-H club and educating the people in your community about tick-borne diseases and things like that. So way to go on that. Social media for sure is something that needs to be tapped into in a big way. I don't know if you were aware, but last month, January 2020, there was, at least in the United States, it was called National One Health Awareness Month, declared from the United States Senate. And from there was a tag that was added on to a lot of Facebook profile pictures of One Health Awareness Month, and then it went into environment, animal health, and human health, and it just was a nice way to start that conversation. So, you know, adding that to your profile picture was a good way to go about it. Blogging is also a good way to go about it, but keep in mind, whenever we talk about One Health, we have to keep it in a positive light and talk about success stories. If we start to go into the nitty-gritty of statistics and how, there are so many diseases shared between people and animals, and our environment is failing us all because of what we've done, nobody's going to be looking at that for too long. You need to change the angle and see and show people, oh yeah, collaboration can give us this. And again, focus on the success stories. And that's how you can get more of the message out to more of the general public. Anything else to add for the others?
Okay, we will move on to our next question from Nisar Khan. Nisar, if you'll unmute your microphone, you can ask your question. It's showing us that you're self-muted. Okay, we will move on to Nawfal Abdujali. And you'll also need to unmute your microphone to ask your question.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Dr. Nawfal from Iraq, University of Kufa. Thank you for good presentation. I have two questions. The first question is, it is possible to establish One Health lab, a central lab for One Health. On this central lab, we have to supply with advanced technique like DNA sequencing and other techniques to detect the pathogens and detect the pathogens in food and soil, food and water and other things. And we have in this lab other or different specialized of researcher. This is the one question. Other question: if we have established this One Health lab, to which ministry we can put this lab? Okay, thank you so much.
Dr. Lueddeke, do you want to take that one?
Well, yes, what the gentleman is saying is how, well, I'll start with the second question first. In terms of the ministry to which to address, is he speaking primarily of Iraq or other countries?
Yes, from Iraq, please.
Yeah, from Iraq. Do you have a ministry
Yes.
of the environment there?
We have Ministry of Health and Environment, Doctor.
Yes. Is it, do you deal with this ministry a lot or at all or at the university or?
I am working in University of Kufa.
Yeah. So are you asking for support from a ministry with the work that you're doing
Yes.
in the central lab? Have you
Yes,
written to
Doctor.
these
We
people?
have.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Have you
Doctor.
written to them?
We have two ministry: Ministry of Health and Environment, and we have Ministry of Agriculture.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So are they, as a university, I guess I don't want to get into detail, too much detail, as a university, do you and the lab and the university generally interact with these ministries? That would be my question. In terms of support.
So,
Are some of the, for example, are some of the students who graduate, who are students at your university, are they working or seconded to any of these ministries? As an example, or
okay.
You know, are they connecting? I don't know. So it's very difficult for me to answer the question because it's very difficult to see exactly why you want to. Are you writing to these people? Do you communicate with the ministries or about One Health? Have you ever had a seminar for them or?
And then my follow-up question to that for you, Doctor, is who do you write grant applications to? And whoever that person is, or sorry, that ministry or organization or whoever receives that grant application, do they truly understand what One Health is and the benefit of that, particularly the financial benefit? How can One Health, or at least the approach of taking a problem and fixing it with a One Health approach, how can that save time, energy, and money? And once that ministry or once that organization understands that, then I think you might have a better chance of getting further support from them.
Okay, thanks everyone for your. So our next and last question is going to be from Yaya Emerencia Naga. Hey, Yaya, we're not able to hear you clearly. Do you want to put your question in the chat box? We can't hear you clearly, so if you want to type your question in the chat box, I can then ask it to our speakers. Okay, we're going to have to move on, but we have one more question from Hayat Abbasi. So you can go ahead.
All right. Yeah, hello. My question is, there was a mention for like, we need to get together, you know, as developed country to take the decision or, you know, discuss. And I put the question, what's about the other countries? And I have part of the answer, if you want. There was a mention during the answer that there is a need, for example, to have a seat at the UN Council. That's one. Or continual education like the Master in Public Health or international meetings. Beside that, you know, can you think, you know, of what you know, based on your expertise and your experience, what can be done for the other countries? Because when we speak about One Health, it's we use the whole globe as one word, you know, and all countries and all area of the world need to be included. So what can we do for the other underdeveloped countries in order to bring them to the table and in order to just, you know, be part of this process?
Yeah, can I just say something quickly? The most important progress can be made at the local level through, I think, education initiatives, as Dr. Thomson mentioned before, raising awareness at the local level, bringing in the decision makers, you know, councils, members of parliament, bringing together various professions, health professions, the veterinary profession, the human medicine profession, and so on. Now, the question then is, this is all important, is how do you raise this, how do you raise this awareness at the local level? And there we need champions, we need people, individuals who care enough at the local level about some of the issues that we've talked about today to say, well, I'm going to try to interest other people. So I think that's at the local level. I think at the national level, as I've said before, we need to get to some of the decision makers in parliaments or whatever they may be called, decision makers, to find out who they are and who might be an elected official who might be amenable to discussing things at the local level, to get a few pilot projects going. That's really what One Hope is about. That's what One Hope is about, to identify pilot projects at all levels really, but say at the local level, that could find funding from philanthropy, from organizations or from the national government and so on. So it's very much a bottom-up, top-down approach, finding key people who are compassionate, committed to making a difference. Now, how you do that in each country depends. But right now, more than ever, we need people like that at the local level, at the higher levels, to get together to talk how this might be done. Not easy. Hello?
Okay, great. Dr. Thomson, Dr. Lueddeke, do you all have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I'm just really appreciative to have this opportunity to talk to everybody about bringing One Health to children all around the world, regardless in what country or region of the world you are coming from. So if you are having any burning questions that were unable to be answered today, or they come up later on, feel free to contact me with my email address that will be posted shortly, and I'm happy to talk with you at that point. Thank you.
Yes, similarly, thank you very much, Dr. Thomson. I feel the same. If you have any questions that you want to raise, that you haven't been able to raise, do send an email to me, and I will try my best to respond to it. If even, I guess, coming away from an hour and a half like this, I think if there's been one idea that has been presented by Dr. Thomson or by myself, which you might say, yeah, you know, I'm going to try to find out more about this, and maybe this hour and a half has been worth it. I do suggest, though, when the recording comes out, that you do have a close look at the references at the end of the presentation. These were very carefully selected, as you can well imagine, and some of these may answer some of the questions, burning questions that you have. So it's very nice to be invited, very lovely to be invited, and to wish you all the best in your aspirations. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Lueddeke and Dr. Thomson. And we'll be sending a follow-up email with a link to this recording and also PDFs of the slides that we've used. And we'll also send more information on One Hope, because that will be a great thing to get involved in. And then we can also send links to the presentations on One Health with Indigenous peoples. So finally, a big thank you to the One Health Commission for allowing us to use this GoToWebinar platform. So thanks everyone for coming and spending part of your day with us, and we'll hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.